What is poppin' people? You got Jay Bear here, bringing you all our Shuckle Premier League Season 3 draft notes. This is for Week 1/2, where we will be going over the results of the Week 1 games, followed by the pick'ems for Week 2. So yeah, before we get into it, I just wanted to thank everyone for all of the overwhelming support on the power rankings and the first episode of Draft Notes for this season. It was truly a joy to my eyes just seeing all of the support, and yeah, it means the world to me. So I just wanted to say that. And then if you're new here, please like and subscribe, and hopefully you'll join me for the rest of the journey. But yeah, without that all being said, let me go ahead and give a quick spoiler warning in 3, or I guess I will be showing the results of the previous week's games in 3, 2, 1. Boom. Okay, so this is the results of Week 1 of the Shuckle Premier League. First game we had Moxie 2-0 Seabad off of the back of King Gambit, Iron Bundle, and Palafin, all putting in some work. Petra Run also being able to do its thing. Seabad's offense was almost able to get there, but not quite. Terra Ghost on the King Gambit was super huge, and then in the game 2, there was a very crucial freeze that disrupted what Seabad wanted to do with his Iron Moth that game, and it just kind of went downhill from there. Up next, Viz versus Keeley. That was another 2-0 set. Most of the sets this week were 2-0s, but in this one we saw Viz game 1 really dominate with his Psychic Terrain, clicking the Trick Room next to Terra Psychic Iron Crown. Keeley was able to adjust somewhat game 2, going for a taunt, but Viz had a nicely prepped Mental Herb on his Meow Stick in order to preserve that Trick Room. And while Sylveon was able to get a couple of pieces, it wasn't able to ultimately win the match, and so we saw Viz win this one in dominating fashion. Then we saw Amel versus Liv, and in that one, Amel was able to clean up 2-0. I know Liv had a little bit of an issue game 2 getting her lead set properly due to, I think, a time constraint, but game 1, Amel was able to do well. The Hoopa unfortunately didn't do as much as I thought it would, but Okie Dokie was a real star of the show in this one, and Sandy Shocks was able to put in a good bit of work. Nexus versus Necro, we saw another 2-0 game in this one, and Nexus was able to get it through on the back of Hisui and Lilligant, putting a lot of stuff to sleep and having incredible damage output. I'm happy I was able to shout that out. Necra, unfortunately, just like the team, wasn't quite able to get there. Maybe if she scouted for the Rock Slide, potentially game 1 with that set of Volcarona, it could have been a bit different. But Nexus just played really, really well, I think, and prepped a great team for this week as well. In what's probably our set of the week, we see Joey versus Aaron, which was a 2-1 set, one of only 2, in which Joey actually was able to come out on top on the back of Furret, of all Pokemon, doing a lot of work with the Follow Me and being able to, help a lot versus Spectrier, but the Grimmsnarl's taunt was a bit of an issue for it, but in the end, Manaphy, Hydrapple, Furret were a great winning core for Joey. But when Aaron was able to get his game plan across with the Grimmsnarl and the Spectrier, that team looked like a force to be reckoned with as well. Our next one, we saw Shuckle versus Sierra, and this was 2 teams kind of trying to do a very similar thing with getting control of the speed. Shuckle ultimately was able to come out, but it was a 2-1 set. Colossal unfortunately couldn't quite put away game 2 for Shuckle, and we saw Sierra win that. And I think just a few different plays could have seen Sierra winning the whole set. Up next, we see Kyle versus Vatsa, and I wasn't quite able to predict this one, but Terrakion actually went insane. I think it got 6 or 7 kills in this set, next to Weavile and Whimsicott supporting it, and Hisui and Zoroark also did some solid damage in this set as well. It was pretty dominant from Vatsa. Mountay versus Clover was another very dominant set, with Archaludon and Mousehold really doing a lot of heavy lifting in the first game. Archaludon being able to OHKO Ursaluna Bloodmoon was absolutely huge, and same with Mousehold being able to OHKO the Brute Bonnet, getting some crucial damage off game 1, and then game 2 was just more of a strong Weather Ball action, even though Clover was able to capture the sun for a bit. Mountay's Weather Balls were still doing plenty of damage. And then Tone versus James. This one wasn't quite as close just because in dominant fashion from the Dondozos, Terra Dragon like I called out, but James actually had a couple of interesting techs on it, being Oblivious to block Salamence's Intimidate, being the speed boosting Tatsugiri in order to potentially get faster. I don't know if that one ended up mattering, but I think game 1 it may have. And then our final one, Owen versus Joe. Joe was able to get his defenses set up, and Curse Mimikyu was especially difficult for Owen's team. And so overall, we see a 7-3 pick'em score from me, which is above where I want to be, but not too far above. I hope I can keep up this level of success for the rest of the season. And then other statistics, we saw 8 games decided in 2-0 fashion and only 2 being decided in 2-1 fashion. And I think just like the order that the games were played, I want to say like 5 or 6 came across 2-0s before we saw the first 2-1 game of the season. So yeah, with all that being said, let's now look at our matchups for the second week of the Shuckle Premier League. Kicking it off, we see Seabad versus Viz. Seabad coming off of that loss, but the Freeze looking to bounce back into the win column, and Viz coming off of a very dominating win. And looking at this matchup, Seabad has a lot of very good offense that matches up quite well into Viz's team. I really like Iron Moth here, just shouting it out, because Fire plus like a Terra Fairy looks really, really good. Maybe with like a little bit of defense investment to better live Entei going for extreme speeds. But other than that, like Fairy plus Fire looks like really good coverage here. You have enough speed with a potential booster speed in order to get above the Dragapult and Iron Crown that could also potentially be running booster speed. And your Tailwind looks a little bit better than Viz's Tailwind, since you have obviously the Prankster from Illumise. And Fluttermane's another really good piece here. Ghost plus Fairy looks really insane. Florges might be a little bit able to stand in this way of this special offense, but it should get overwhelmed. And while Iron Moth doesn't have necessarily the best special poison move for doubles, since it does not have Sludge Bomb, Acid Spray will be a nice tech hit in order to hit that Florges, I think, this game. We could even see a Meteor Beam set for Araquanid and Entei, so I think it has a lot of different options, and why I want to shout it out. And, you know, if Viz gets out of position versus it from a potential like Gothitelle could potentially also be huge. Obviously, Dragapult can get out of there, but other than that, Gothitelle looks like it could be quite solid in this one. And the plenty of Fake Out should also help this matchup get pushed forward for Seabad. But on Viz's side, I really do want to shout out the Dragapult and the versatility of it. Since it's faster than Fluttermane, I like a lot of the Terra Ghost offense from this team, just because if you look at Moxie's Ghost Resist, it's his 2 worst Pokemon on the draft with Greedent and Krokorok. But also the support, I think, could be really nice. Getting up like a light screen could be super crucial against Moxie's team, whether he wants to do that with the Dragapult or maybe with the Meowstic. But overall, I really do like what I see from Viz's side. I think a lot of his offense still has that great matchup, and I did shout out both of their offenses here. I think this will probably be a very offensive game, and I really like a lot of what Viz's offense has to offer here, so I will be picking Viz to win this one. Up next, we see Emil versus Moxie, 2 coaches that got off to great starts in their week 1 battles, and I should have shouted this guy out last week, but I will shout it out this week. I think Okidogi is super crucial here. And it really just plays well off of Emil's Psy-Spam offense as something that I kind of slept on in the power rankings portion that I did. But the Psy-Spam pairs super well with Okidogi, right? What's the Psy-Spam counter? It's the Dark, it's the King Gambit. Okidogi can punch that thing in the face. What's Okidogi's best counter in this matchup? Petra Run. Psy-Spam shreds that thing. So overall, I really do like the Okidogi offensive matchup, and I think it opens up Hoopa and Indeedee for the Psy-Spam offense. And on Moxie's side, I really do like that King Gambit. I think it is going to be a crucial piece in holding Emil's offense back. And I really like the Iron Bundle plus Palafin plus Abomasnow combo as well. The ice damage, especially Freeze Dry, looks super clean into Emil's team when the best resistance option is the Skeledirge. And you can just go ahead and Hydro Pump it. Shaman Sky obviously folds to that ice coverage as a water type, or like for the water types, and like even like if Palafin wants to run like an Ice Punch or something, but it has to really watch out. And especially with the Iron Bundle outspeeding, it does potentially have a fast Tailwind, but Iron Bundle with a booster speed should be able to get over that even as well, or even has to watch out with Abomasnow's Ice Shard. Another niche option I think on the Iron Bundle could be like a Choice Scarf with a U-turn to guaranteed one-hit KO Hoopa Unbound unless it Terras, and I think that could potentially catch Amel off guard. I think Moxie has a lot of tools here between his setup, and I think the Abomasnow's Aurora Veil could potentially slow down the Psy spam enough, and King Gambit could be able to get out of hand enough for Moxie to win this game. Yeah, so I do pick Moxie here to win this one. Moving on, we see Nexus versus Keely, and I do like Nexus's son a lot here. It feels like, you know, Keely was trying to do the all-weather thing where she has like a Pokemon or two that really can thrive in every single weather, aside from like sand, but she doesn't also have like a really good sand setter. But I think her lack of sort of a great direction with the weather will punish her, because Nexus is very devoted to the sun, and I think Keely might want to try to rumble in the rain with Tornadus. But I really do like what Torkoal can do, and I think especially next to Hisui and Lilligant, just being able to throw off like triple axle in close combat, similar to his set week 1, I think could be super crucial here, and also just throwing out potential sleep powders, because nothing really likes holding the goggles here. I guess maybe you could see it on like any of the mons could theoretically hold the goggles, but nothing really wants to. I feel like they all really like other items. And I also think Iron Hands, if Trick Room ever gets super out of hand versus this team. So that's just something else to consider as well. I really do like the Trick Room offense on Nexus's side this week. That's something that I sort of thought was a potential weaknesses of Keely in the draft. And so I think Nexus clicking the Trick Room here and then punishing with Torkoal or Iron Hands will be his best course of action. And on Keely's side, I think punching through Nexus's team is best done by Landorus Incarnate. The ground resist, it's just like Misdreavus, Charizard, and Hisui and Lilligant. Charizard fold to like a Rock Slide or something. Misdreavus, not really the best bulky Pokemon here. Folds to a lot of the physical offense on Keely's side. And then Lilligant is going to actually be an issue potentially for the Landorus. Even in Chlorophyll, it would actually outspeed if Keely wants to get rid of the sun with a Rain Dance, it'll outspeed Landorus. If Keely wants to set a Tailwind, it'll outspeed the Landorus, which is an important speed tier to note here. And because of that speed tier, along with Nexus's dominant Trick Room strategy, I think here, I actually do favor Nexus in this matchup, and I will pick Nexus to win this one. Our fourth matchup, we see Joey versus Liv. And I do want to shout out Deancey here. Looking at Liv's team, that top 5 is all weak to Deancey stabs plus Conkeldurr. So like the top 6 is pretty much all weak to Deancey stabs, which is something that you don't really want to see, because despite the 100 base attack stat or special attack stat, it'll still be able to pack an incredible punch. I think like a Life Orb Trick Room set potentially could be really, really cool here. And I think potentially like a Scarf Annihilate to potentially get through any one of Liv's threats. Maybe even like the Tinkaton I think could be huge, because that's Deancey's best resistance obviously here on this team. And then like potentially like Annihilate and Bronzong. Bronzong should be able to get Trick Room up if you're like final gambiting the theoretical best way to stop that Trick Room. Or Deoxys Speed trying to go fast, I think, is another great option into this team with like Thunderbolt and Ice Beam. Just really good coverage into Liv's team, other than Tinkaton. And you have Mudsdale for Tinkaton to potentially get through that. But other than that, the Tinkaton matchup isn't great. But I also did want to shout out Volcanion. So if you look at Joey's team, the water resist is Manaphy, it's Poltergeist, it's Hydrapple. Poltergeist doesn't really count for the sake of resisting Volcanion. Manaphy is a good resist, Hydrapple is a good resist, but if you look at the pairing with Raging Bolt, that's actually an insane combination of two Pokemon to incredibly threaten Joey's side. But I really do like Joey's options here from his mythical threats, Deancey and Deoxys. I know Manaphy's also a mythical, but I don't necessarily like its matchup here quite as much, because that top 2 core from Liv's team kind of does stifle whatever Manaphy would want to do here without tearing. And even if it does Terra, I think like you would want to tear into like potentially like Electric or something could be good, but then you're potentially a little bit too weak to Garchomp. So I think that's an interesting consideration, and I could see it happening, but I think that Deancey, Deoxys Speed, Annihilate, Bronzong, Mudsdale is a pretty solid core. And then like you could get support from like Sneasel, you could get support from Furret, especially after that week 1 game. I mean, Joey might be trying to force the Furret, who knows. Or even like Hydrapple damage I think could be solid, but I don't necessarily see Hydrapple. It kind of loses to a lot of Liv's offensive threats. So I do pick Joey to win this one. I think he has a couple of good modes compared to Liv kind of just trying to fight in between Joey's modes a little bit, which I do think Liv's team is really good at fighting in between modes and has tools to win, obviously. I think this will be a really close set, but I do pick Joey to win it. Up next, we see Shuckle King going up against Necra, and I do think that this will be a quite offensive set, and I really do like Shuckle King's Urshifu here, especially into like Cornerstone Ogerpon, Volcarona, Gudra. I think that's a great way to get through that potential top core. Suicune obviously can stifle it a little bit, and it does kind of need to contend with Flame Body burns, but something interesting that Shuckle could do is potentially throw like a Terra Fire on this thing, or even throw like a Punching Glove on it. Punching Glove, usually you don't see it on Urshifu because then it stops not Wicked Blow, it stops Unseen Fist from working. But in a matchup like this, you might want to consider it. But I do just like the water plus fighting offense. I think it looks really good if Shuckle can control the speeds. And I think his speed control options look really good, especially Talonflame really punishes Volcarona. There's not much Volcarona can do to Talonflame, and it is in constant fear of just getting Brave Birded with priority. Can't really set up without Terraing. And what would it Terra into to resist Talonflame? Steel, Rock, gets blown up by Landorus, which I think Shuckle King's big offensive threats here all look really good. And a potential flying spam route looks pretty solid, because a lot of his good Pokemon have ways through Gudra. And you can even consider like helping them out with Sinistcha, which can also help break through some of the bulky waters, or Zapdos to break through the bulky waters. I think Shuckle has a lot of good offensive synergy here. And I could see like Orthworm to potentially help with the Cornerstone Ogerpon, or Alolan Persian for Fake Out support, or even Riolu to support. But I don't think that one makes as much sense as like Persian or Orthworm. But I think that top 5 comes for sure on Shuckle's side. And on Necra's side, I do want to highlight that Cornerstone Ogerpon. The rock type offense just looks so good into Shuckle's team, especially when you consider that his best rock resist, which is Urshifu, gets power whipped and dies. So I think that's a really, really important thing in this matchup. And also follow meing away key attacks could potentially be big. Because I was talking about how, Volcarona doesn't appreciate Talonflame. Well, if Talonflame's Brave Bird is getting follow meat away, and even potentially into like a Terra Rock Ogerpon, which gets to +1 defense for free from its ability, you can potentially be actually able to set up your Volcarona. You still can't quite hit Talonflame, so I don't necessarily know if that vision works out 100%, but I do think that it is a potential option. That being said, I do think Shuckle's offense is quite overwhelming here, and I don't necessarily see Necra's best path for winning it this matchup, so I do pick Shuckle to win this one. I think his offense is just very well positioned. Up next, we see Kyle versus Cybertron, and we just saw Incineroar win another regional, and I think Incineroar will be the key to winning another match. I think being able to get Intimidates down, we saw in like Regulation H a lot. Incineroar pivoting around on Ursaluna is one of the best ways to stall through Trick Room and potentially weaken that thing's damage output into more manageable territory. I also think that Amoonguss plays an interesting role in the Trick Room dynamic here. But yeah, Incineroar also slows down Spectre, which is another main important role for this team, and has really good synergy with the Amoonguss, kind of being able to cover it from any potential attacks from like Tauros and the likes. So I think that Incineroar here with Fake Out support obviously is going to be the key for Kyle to stall his way through the Trick Room. And I think, being able to potentially remove the Trick Room is one of the best ways to beat this team, because then some of your faster threats like Hydreigon, potentially Superior, can all put in the work. Superior especially has a decent matchup here with a potential Terra type of like Fire, let's say, to get through a lot of what Aaron may want to do, because obviously Leaf Storm is quite spammable here, other than like Wo-Chien, Vivian, and Enamorus. And Wo-Chien and Vivian both don't appreciate the Terra Fire, Terra Blast, or you can even go Terra Stellar for that matter. It also has great synergy with Superior. And maybe Kyle thinks he can deny the Trick Room and wants to set up the Swamp with Superior and Prim, another decent option for his team. But I think all of this has to happen in the context of Incineroar pivoting and supporting the team. And for Aaron, I really do think that this is one of the better Ursaluna matchups. Obviously, Drifblim technically resists the Dual Stab, or is actually immune to the Dual Stab, but it's one crunch away from dying, or like an Ice Punch or something away from dying in probably 2 hits, maybe even 1, depending on how it is trained. But getting a flame or boost and guts boosted in order to get through Kyle's team, I think is an incredible consideration. You also have a potential like levitating duo of Vikavolt and Hydreigon, which can potentially use Terra to get around a normal weakness, and then you're potentially staring down something that's immune to your ground move and and resistant to your normal move. So it can get slowed down that way, but that A, requires a lot of Terra and resource commitment, and B, Ursaluna still does plenty of damage anyways. And if they're forced to Terra, then those are a couple of valuable Pokemon. Hydreigon especially for dealing with a potential Spectrier, and Vikavolt is one important Trick Room piece, but not necessarily the strongest into Aaron's team. And it doesn't necessarily kill Ursaluna back is the main consideration. So with all that being said, I think Aaron has a great Trick Room matchup this week and can really set it up and click those buttons. So I do pick Aaron to win this one versus Kyle this week. Up next, we see Mountay versus Sierra. Mountay coming off of a huge win, Sierra coming off of a close loss. I think Mountay will be able to continue his momentum. I think Archaladon, if I wanted to shout out a set, I think Terra Dragon looks really, really good. Roaring Moon kind of doesn't really need to carry a Dragon move into Mountay's team, so I think Terra Dragon kind of goes quite unpunished here. There's not really a strong Ice type threat to consider. This is a matchup where Regieleki doesn't even potentially go Ice. So, like, if it comes, it may not even have Terra Ice Blast for Archaladon, and if it does, you don't necessarily need to Terra. But I think just like an AV Dragon set, or even like a Choice Specs Dragon Pulse looks really, really solid. If Mountay can feel confident in setting the speed control with potentially Trick Room here, I think from the Weird Ear could be really, really good. And then Mousehold, I think, has another solid matchup into Sierra's offense. You do kind of have to contend with Corviknight, but I think Archaladon, Mousehold, Thundurus, I think, is a big 3 core for Sierra to deal with, especially if the Archaladon can utilize Terra Dragon boosted Dragon Pulses and Draco Meteors to really get through this team. And on Sierra's side, I think Roaring Moon is super important as a speed control option, and also a potential weather setter here. Being able to click like a fast sunny day or something to get out of the rain, I think, is important. It helps your Chiyu out a lot, although Chiyu could ride the bench in this matchup, but it's one of your best ways through Archaladon, so I don't know if you can afford that. And I think Ogerpon's Redirection will also serve quite useful here, especially getting around the water moves, which is something to consider from the Rain team. Although Mountay's Rain team is, is quite multidimensional, it doesn't necessarily rely on water moves as much as a lot of other Rain offenses, and actually can't quite contend as well with like Overquill as a Swift Swim Sweeper, which I think has a solid niche here. But I also think Corviknight is another potential option for Tailwind if you want to focus with Roaring Moon as like changing the weather or as a potential sweeper. I think those are all potential considerations for Sierra, but I do think Mountay's Rain is quite favorable here. Up next, we see Tone versus That's a +1. And I didn't quite see the Terrakion matchup last time, but I think that it's a little bit more favorable here. So in order for Tone to combat that, I think he will need to use some speed control of his own. And while Tailwind, can really get over a lot of Tone's team, I think Sand boosted Excadrill, but also Tyranitar in potential Trick Room are 2 great options for Tone to really get through this team. So I want to highlight Tyranitar here. If you look at the dual stabs, they do quite well. And then just some coverage for Terrakion and a potential Terra type as well to help out, like a Terra Ground could potentially be really useful in getting around Terrakion, or even a Terra Fairy I think looks really solid. That gives you another solid Regidrago answer. And that's all something to consider. I think Tyranitar just clicking like solid, strong options like an Assault Vest will be pretty solid here, or even like 3 attacks so that it can afford to run Protect could be another solid consideration. And I think Tone would probably want to get up the Trick Room to support it. I think in Trick Room, Tone's team can potentially thrive with like a Trick Room Gardevoir as the option to set it and also attack with it. Although that's it could potentially run like an Imprisoned Chandelure to try to get around that, but Tyranitar threatens Chandelure so much it could be potentially difficult to deal with. On that side, I really wanted to shout out Regidrago here. Without Terra Fairy, Tone's team is quite weak to this behemoth. Gardevoir as the one solo option isn't necessarily the bulkiest fairy that we're dealing with. So I think just being able to click like Dragon Claws or Draco Meteors or Dragon Energies, if we're really, really able to do it, could really get around this team and do a ton of damage. And it also resists Ogre Pond. And whenever you have something that can help beat the one menace that just can click a Terrafire Ivy Cudgel, that's always something to consider. And I think that has a really solid matchup being able to do that here. And I do like That's' offense here with the with the Regidrago and the Terrakion and the speed control from Whimsicott. I think that Tone probably has to think a little bit outside the box if he wants to win this one. And I think That's has a bit more of a straightforward time approaching this game, which is why I do favor That's in my pick'ems. Up next, we see Owen versus Cloverbells, and on Owen's side, I had two potential shoutouts, and that's the iconic duo. It's Chien-Pao and Dragonite, but I will shout out Chien-Pao here. I think it is super important in this matchup, just being able to click strong ice moves like a Icicle Crash or Ice Spin or whatever Owen chooses. Plus Sucker Punch is an incredible offensive matchup, or not Sucker Punch, but like Crunch. And it has a very fast like Taunt, which could be useful for Smeargle potentially, or for Regiroth, or even Murkrow. It will be able to get one like Tailwind off, but not too much more after that. And just being able to do a ton of damage is super useful, and also support Dragonite, because Dragonite potentially misses out on some KOs without the support of Chien-Pao's Sword of Ruin, but with it, it's just a devastating attacker. It'll probably get through most of Clover's team in 1 or 2 hits, and especially with the Sword of Ruin boost, it is potentially game over if he's like a Scale Shot set, or even like calling back to like what Dragapult would run in a little bit of Regulation Nature with a Choice Banded Outrage, because Outrage is a pretty drawback-free click without Terastallization. Clover has no real resistance to an Outrage, so that'll be something to consider, and especially when backed up with the support of Chien-Pao. I think that's super duper important to consider, and it's also faster than Clover's entire team. And, you know, in Tailwind, that's not necessarily true, but having a Pokemon be faster than the entire team is always an important statistic and a benchmark for a trainer to be able to have. So I think Owen's offensive physical Sword of Ruin matchup here looks really, really good. On Clover's side, I think Brute Bonnet's a super useful piece here. Being able to click Rage Powder, I think Terra Fairy looks really, really solid. You get like a Terra Fairy Terra Blast, which is really solid offensively into a lot of Owen's team. And you get the Rage Powder, being able to redirect potential Chien-Pao hits and Dragonite hits. And I really like Rocky Helmet to potentially punish like an Ice Spinner Chien-Pao, or like a Dragonite that's clicking like Iron Head is its best way of hitting you theoretically. So I think Terra Fairy has a really good matchup on this Brute Bonnet, and I think it'll be one of Clover's best ways to potentially get around Owen's team and get around a lot of the offense that Owen has with this crucial piece of redirection. Our final, I believe, matchup for the week, yes, it is our final matchup of the week, is James versus Joe, and I think this is your matchup of the week here. We have another solid VGC versus VGC duo. I don't know if these guys have played much in the IRL circuit at all, but these are two of your top coaches to look at in the league, and actually in the power rankings, number 2 versus number 1 teams. So I think that is something to note, and whoever wins this battle is in a great shape. They both had very, very solid week 1 showings, and I'm excited to see this one. But let's analyze it real quick. On Joe's side, I really do like the Milotic matchup here. It's your probably best Dondozo answer. Yes, Dondozo has to contend with like Rillaboom and Gouging Fire as well to potentially get through the Terra turns, but Milotic always threatens the Haze, so I think that solo Dozo may actually be better than combining with Tatsugiri in this game. I could see a Tatsugiri bench, but Scald Haze is a great toolkit for Joe to be able to have this game. Just being able to like recover, and I even think in a slower paced game like this, being able to throw out Hypnosis is a super cool option just to potentially punish James's slower play in this matchup. I do think that slower play could potentially be punished by like Rillaboom being able to pivot in and out, but I think ultimately a lot of what James does on this team, Joe's offense can really, really struggle into if he decides to take it more slowly. And on James's side, I will highlight the Glamora. I think Toxic Spikes will be potentially very useful here. Sneasler, struggles to get through a bulkier Dondozo. I think solo Dondozo, looking at this matchup, is super strong into Joe's team. And, you know, potentially next to Ting Lu, it just makes it all the more easy to just sit on the field. And I think Lamora getting up the Toxic Spikes really speeds up Joe's game. And, you know, Milotic might have been taking some more passive turns, getting the chance to click Hypnosis. But that's harder with Joe having the Glamora here. Or, sorry, with James having Glamora for Joe's more passive turns. And also just potentially being able to rip like a one-time Meteor Beam, get through Moltres, which might otherwise be scary, get through Gouging Fire, could be really great considerations here for James. But yeah, this is my pick for match of the week, and I do pick James to win this one. Hopefully my pick'ems go as well as last week or better, and I appreciate you all for watching with me to the end of this video. Let me know if you guys want any other potential insight for these matchups, but I've been enjoying getting a chance to analyze everything so far. And yeah, with all that being said, I will see you guys next time. Peace.